Go.
Well, what's up, girl dads? I am here with a special guest. I'm super excited. This is my buddy Joey. Known him for, I don't know, I think a couple of years now, back and forth, kind of
3 or 4.
Yeah, met over the social medias. He is a health coach and a dad of daughters. And so I reached out and was like, hey, man, you're like the perfect example for this show. So, Joey, why don't you give us just a quick intro to who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into it.
What's up, man? Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. So my name's Joey. I am a telecommunications project manager turned health coach about 4.5 years ago. Kind of went down the rabbit hole of my own health journey a number of years ago, was working myself to death, gained a bunch of weight, realized things needed to change. And a number of years ago, I kind of dove into a healthier lifestyle, started working out more, got into nutrition via some athletes I met. And through that, transitioned my whole career into helping other people lead healthier lives, particularly, busy professionals, folks who have families, folks who struggle to keep it together during the week, if you will, relative to their incredibly busy lifestyles.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love you did the 10-year challenge post on Instagram recently, and I loved it because you had your kids in there, like your girls were in there, and it totally frames, like it frames your body and your kid, and they were both very different than your current situation, but it showed a huge change. What was a time in which you came to realize, hey, like I need to change health for my family as a whole? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I just think that, like I said, it started with me. Because I looked at myself and I wasn't being the example that I wanted to be for my wife and for my kids. I was about 70, 80 pounds overweight. I was eating too much. I was drinking too much as a mechanism to relieve stress. I was working too much. Just nothing about my health was my priority. So the realization really wasn't a matter of I want my family to be healthier. It was the question that I asked myself was, am I being the example I want to set for my family right now? And the answer was a hard no, which was a really challenging thing to look at yourself in the mirror and have to come to the realization that you're not being an example for your little girls and your spouse. So from there, I decided to make changes for myself because I want to be the example. I want my kids to look to me and see somebody that they would like to grow up to be like. Right. And regardless of how I'm behaving, I think we can all agree that kids are looking to you no matter what. They're looking when you don't think that they're looking. So they're going to pick up on your behaviors for better or worse. So I realized that, if they're going to be picking up on my behaviors, I certainly want them to be picking up on behaviors that are going to carry them into a long and healthy, life that gives them an opportunity for longevity and to be prosperous themselves.
Yeah. I had a similar realization too, is that like for me, I wanted to tell my girls that, they could go get whatever they wanted, right? They could go after it. But then I looked at myself and I was like, I'm actually living in fear, not chasing my dream, not doing the things that I want to go do. So I'm a hypocrite. Like I'm inconsistent. My message is going to be inconsistent with my life. And you're right. They pick up on everything that you do. Like even when you don't think, like you think I got away with that, you didn't, man. They pick up, they just absorb all of your subconscious. They absorb everything.
That little point you just made, they pick up on everything. I mean, just the other day, man, I'm reading a book right now. My book was sitting on the coffee table. I didn't think anything of it. Later that evening, my kid wants to play Hangman with me. The game where you write the slashes for the letters and then And she wrote out the thing for Hangman and we're playing. I couldn't figure out what her word was. And I lost. Well, the word that she came up with was the title to the book I was reading. They're watching when you don't think they're watching.
She's all coming in with Atomic Habits. And you're like, wait, what?
Well, yeah. I'm like, cool. Yeah.
I was thinking Dr. Seuss. Like my brain was in a different spot. Oh, that's hilarious, man. So how did the transition? So it's obviously, it's hard with a family and we both know this. So like when you start something with yourself, you're right. You got to start with yourself because you can't give to anybody if you're not taken care of first. Like you have to be healthy in order to help anybody else, mentally, physically, everything. How did that, but I think we struggle with the, I don't know if conflict is the right word, but when your family wants to go have donuts every Saturday morning, but you're like, hey, I got to have eggs and whole wheat toast, we can't, then there's kind of like this friction that happens with the whole family versus just you.
Well, one of the things that I realized that troubled me when I jumped down this, kind of health and wellness rabbit hole was just how much conflicting information there is out there. And then beyond that, how much all or nothing information there is out there. Kind of you're either a healthy person or you're not. You're either on the whatever diet or you're not. You're either doing crazy HIIT workouts or you're not. There was no middle ground. And that struck me as problematic. Because there's always middle ground. There's always a gray area, especially in the context of our busy lives. It's not totally reasonable to cook gourmet, nutritious food for your kids 7 days a week when you work 50, 60 hours a week and there's emails and phone calls at night and then soccer games to get the kids to, et cetera. So one of the approaches that I, started applying with my kids that was very similar to how I approached this with myself was rather than thinking like, what do I need to remove? They can't have donuts. They can't have pancakes and syrup. They can't have sugary treats. I started thinking about it in terms of what can I add in? Kind of this whole idea of habit displacement, rather than you don't break a habit by just saying, I'm not going to do that thing anymore, and then white knuckling it through it until you start over again. Think of everybody who's ever tried to quit smoking. That's just not the right approach to breaking a habit. What I worked on, and I work on this with my clients and with my kids, a lot of this stuff is transferable, is habit displacement. So you can have a donut. There's nothing wrong with that. You can go get a box of 12 donuts on a Sunday morning. But in addition to our donut, we're also going to make some eggs, and we're going to put a piece of fruit on the plate, and we're going to make a nice, well-rounded plate. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to eat that plate mindfully, so that when we're done with the plate, we can kind of recognize, like, am I full or am I not full? And relative to the answer to that question, do we have a second donut or not? So it's not so much about what you can and can't have. It's more about, let's have the things we want while also giving ourselves the things that we need.
Yeah, I love that, because what it does is it focusing on adding is focusing on the positive versus focusing on the negative, which is the removing, right? So when we're modeling for our kids, like you said, like eating healthy, if you just say, man, I can't have donuts, this sucks. Like I really want, like, bummer, like, no, I can't, all they're going to see is, man, dad is miserable. Like he's quote unquote eating healthy, but he's not happy. So why would I ever want to do that?
And then they correlate eating healthy or dieting, if you will, which is a word I don't care for, with something negative. As opposed to correlating being a healthy and happy person as a positive. So you hit the nail on the head. It's a matter of how you frame it relative to how they're going to perceive it now and later in life. Do you want them to turn into somebody who's always on the next diet, or do you want them to turn into somebody who just generally understands how to recognize what their body needs while also, living in the context of real life
and joy? Like that was one of the things, like when I've started my diet, changing my diet, my food, was that, like I told him, I was like, man, I don't want to be miserable, because it's not sustainable, because I have bad habits. Like I have, like an addictive personality. So like when I become unhappy, I want to numb my behavior. And I do that with junk food or, all kinds of the bad things out there. And I was like, so if I'm going to change what I'm intaking, like I have to be happy too. So like, you can't just cut all of the things that make, like I still like dessert, but if you say, hey, you can't have dessert ever again, or like, I love the pastry pictures on your Instagram, man. But like, if they said you can never have that again, like I'm just not going to be happy anymore. Like that's not sustainable if you can't be happy.
Right. That's a very astute way of phrasing it and framing it, because you're absolutely right. If we force ourselves into misery, what are we forcing ourselves into? Misery for us as a parent, misery for the child. I don't know if you've ever had a fight with your kid over whether or not she can have the candy or not, but that is not a pleasant place to be as a parent. We want to frame this in a positive way. And we want to have the joys in life, because at the end of the day, food is culture, food is love, food is family, food is friendship, food is social engagement. There's so much more to it than just calories in your body or not. There's so much more to it. So it isn't a matter of taking away all of the joys that can come with food. It's just not realistic or sustainable or a way to maintain any semblance of happiness in your household.
Right.
you know?
Right.
So
And that's what
I
we're
totally
modeling.
agree
Yeah.
with you.
So,
But
yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
you got
Ask
it.
your
Okay.
question.
So tell me a little bit about, you use the phrase, habit displacement. Tell me a little bit about that. Can we go into that a little bit more? Like, I like that term. You've used it with me a little bit. Like you've been coaching me passively through Instagram forever. And that's one of the phrases that I know from you and that I've liked, like I remember you telling me, just put this out here, the bowl of fruit out there so that, you can, instead of reaching for this bowl, you reach into that bowl type of a thing.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, let's talk habit displacement. I mean, you just kind of went into it a moment ago with the whole thought, and you didn't use this terminology, but what you said was that, you don't want to lose the joy in eating because sometimes you just want to go have a pastry because it makes you feel good, right? Well, ultimately what you're looking for at that moment is a dopamine hit. You're looking to eat something that's going to make you feel good. You know that carby, fatty food is going to make you feel good, right? For a few minutes, a couple hours, whatever.
True.
If you do it consistently, what ends up happening? We end up eating too much of it. We end up gaining weight. We end up not feeling good about ourselves. All that there is to be said about overconsumption of sugar and high fatty foods. So but at the end of the day, if we can root that back to what we're really trying to get out of that thing, it's to feel good at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we displace that habit with something else that's going to make us feel good? And if we stop and think about all the things in the world that make us feel good, getting some fresh air makes us feel good. Taking a few deep breaths makes us feel good. Going on a little bit of a walk can make us feel good. Even eating something sweet, like a sweet piece of fruit, can give us the same level of satisfaction. We just don't think about it that way.
Right.
So when I find myself, or when I'm working with a client or even my kiddos, when I find them, looking for that quick sugar hit, and I recognize like, hey, I think that they really just need something to make them feel good right now. Because a little bit of stress in the house, or they just got done with school and it was a rough day or whatever. Hey, let's go on a walk. Let's displace that habit and recognize that there's other things that we can go do that are going to give us that same release mentally. Yeah. Now, if you get into like just food in general, it's a theory I like to call modifying your food environment. So you just gave some examples that you've seen on my Instagram page, which are all really good strategies. Like what's visible is what you're going to grab. If there's a food in your house, someone or someone you mildly tolerate eventually is going to end up eating it. So rather than making the carby fatty foods visible, let's put a fruit bowl on the kitchen counter and keep it full. That's a key. You can't just put the bowl out there and let it get empty and then forget to fill it. Let's put a fruit bowl out there. So that's the first thing we see. Let's make the less desirable foods, the foods we know we should probably be eating a little bit less of. Let's make those less accessible. Let's put those in the back of the pantry, in the back of the freezer. They're still there. You're still allowed to get them if you want, but increase the barrier to entry to actually grabbing that food while decreasing the barrier to entry to grabbing the food that's going to support the goal you say you have.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one really easy to implement today example of habit displacement. Yeah. And then ultimately, stop to ask yourself why. Like, why am I in the kitchen right now? What am I doing in here? Especially from the work at home environment. I mean, I know I'm guilty of this in the past 2 years. Now that I can work from home and I can wander out of my office whenever I want, how many times a day do you find yourself in the kitchen rummaging for food you probably don't need at that moment? When if you just stopped and asked yourself, why am I in here right now? It might elicit a thought process that takes you someplace else. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also too with men and dads, like we don't stop and ask ourselves what we're actually feeling. Cause that's been huge on my health journey too, is what am I actually feeling? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling stress? Am I feeling sadness? Because men aren't supposed to feel sadness or hurt, or like they're not supposed to feel those feelings. Like my kids, I love them to death, but man, they can cut me real deep sometimes. And then you find yourself like you're wanting to do something again to feel better, but you're not hungry. You just want to not feel that deep cut that they just hit you with. And then when you acknowledge like, man, no, that hurt me in my heart like that. I'm feeling emotions. I'm not feeling hunger, but I don't have the skill to distinguish between the two sometimes.
You hit the nail on the head with, the kind of the male psyche and some of the stigmas therein related to, feeling emotions, being willing to talk about how we feel. I personally, not that this is the direction this conversation will go. I've been in therapy for dealing with emotional issues for a number of years now. And I share that freely because I think it's something that can help any number of men out there. And learning to be more willing to express how I'm feeling at a given moment with my spouse, with my kids, has exponentially increased the level of happiness in our household.
Yeah,
just because there's nothing hidden. You're not hiding anything. You're not hiding behind something without even realizing you're doing it. And then when you can apply that to the kitchen and recognize, like, what am I doing in here right now? As I already said, not to beat a dead horse for lack of a better way of saying it, but when you can ask yourself that and then start to, kind of coach your children and others who are willing to listen in your household on that as well, well, then suddenly you can make a big difference in relative to the overall health of your household as you start displacing that habit with other healthy habits. Hey, you know what? Let's get outside. Let's go take some fresh breaths of fresh air and go on a walk around the block, or let's just go sit in the living room and talk for a minute or whatever. There's a million things you can imagine that. Let's just sit and talk to each other when we're bored instead of, going and grabbing a snack.
Right.
So I'm on the same page with you completely relative to how this stuff applies to, your emotional well-being and expressive abilities as well.
Yeah. So, man, that's you've hit a ton of really good stuff and a lot of things I think you could actually just we could start implementing right now. But if you were going to bring it down to the most basic, like, hey, dads out there, this is step one. Like you got to turn the knob in order to push the door open. Like, this is step one. What is the one thing that you would have dads start doing to start building in health into the lifestyle so that we can do all the modeling and all the things that we talked about?
Be an active participant in what your children and your household's eating. A lot of the folks that I work with, there's one person in the house who's doing the cooking. It's just kind of something I see consistently. Be an active role in the food preparation in your house. Bring your kids into the food preparation in your house. Take them grocery shopping. Let them help you meal plan. If you guys do a menu at home or whatever for the week, however you go about planning your weekly food for the week, let the kids take an active role in that. Allow for them to see what goes in to just planning a meal. It doesn't even have to be a healthy meal, but by virtue of just seeing the steps that it takes to go from I'm hungry to I've eaten a meal is a skill that can easily then be grown from exponentially to add in new things. So take an active role in the relative to cooking and the food in your household, and bring the kids into the fold as well.
I love that. Yeah, that's one of the things I've been working on in my brain is incorporating. So like I did a podcast recently, and I was like, if you want to go after a goal and you're a dad, incorporating your family is a big part of it, because you can't just isolate yourself from them, because then you're going to be a negligent dad. Like, if you have to incorporate whatever you're doing, you have to incorporate your family into that, or it's just not, again, you're going to have all the same things. You're not going to be happy. You're going to be lonely. Your kids are going to grow up without a dad, blah, 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 all this stuff. So the more you incorporate them and not treat them like little minions to be pushed aside, the better off they're going to be, the better off we're going to be. I love that.
Absolutely.
Man. That's
Absolutely.
fantastic. All right, Joey, why don't you let everybody know where to find you, where to reach out to you, where to hit you up for if they're looking for help with their health and fitness and all of that.
All the usual outlets. So my name is on Instagram. It's just at Joey Szolowicz. Facebook, my Facebook page is Coach Joey Szolowicz. And then I coach directly for a company called BSL Nutrition. That's Body Systems Labs Nutrition. So I highly encourage you to follow BSL Nutrition on the socials as well. And you find us both there, and I'll happily carry this conversation on further with anybody who's interested.
That's fantastic. Thanks, man. I appreciate you, Joey.
You too, man. Thanks so much for having me on.